I wanted to just take this opportunity to welcome my friend and colleague, Kelly Thompson. Thank you so much for joining. So, for those of you who don't know, Kelly is a woman of who wears many hats, but what we're talking about today is her background in astrology. So, Kelly, I'd like to start off just by getting a bit of an understanding of how you got into astrology in the first place. Like, how did that all happen?
Well, my interest was first piqued eons ago when I would read, these teen magazines in the 90s and they had your horoscope in them and I always found it fascinating. But then that evolved into me going into my local bookstores and going into the esoteric section and just reading about the general aspects of astrology, what the different signs mean. Um, I kind of put that away for a while and ignored my spiritual side, my mystical side during my 20s. As so many do, I feel like that's
Mhm.
natural progression. But then once um, I had my son in Thailand where they firmly believe in astrology and they put your zodiac sign on your birth certificate. Um, I got back into it, but in a deeper and more profound way because I just found it fascinating how I could see all the connections that people had been making for thousands and thousands of years. I could start see these patterns in my own life. So I thought, oh, I think I'd really enjoy studying this. So yeah.
So, how did you end up studying it? Like, how did you end up getting that knowledge? I mean, starting with, teenager magazines, but
Yeah.
then getting deep into it into your practice, because there's lots of different paths people can take. So, I
Mhm.
was curious about yours.
Well, so first I started with the Thai lunar astrology, the also commonly known as the Chinese zodiac.
Mhm.
But then as I progressed in learning more and what was accessible to me in my language, which is English, I started through books, started reading about Hellenistic astrology
Hmm.
and the whole sign house system.
Hmm.
And so that was mostly either reading articles online or taking some books out of the library. But I really, really got serious. And at that time, this was about 10 years ago, I became familiar with sun, moon, rising,
Hmm.
and lightly familiar with what different planets meant. But again, I had a young child. I was working full time, so I didn't have as much time to devote to it. But about a few years ago, I got really serious about it. And I downloaded almost every astrology app and was reading. Read them I read them every single day. I read every single text possible in the apps. But then I got myself a mentor. Shout out to Nicola Goikura, the Astro Botanica. She is a phenomenal astrologer based out of Philadelphia, and she's my mentor. And so I hired her, and she's my astrologer and mentor. And yeah, that's where it really took off because I mentorship, I can't even like the value of having a mentor and having someone to tell you this ancient oral and written tradition, but it really makes it more profound. And I have a deeper appreciation for it by learning it from another expert.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So, you mentioned some apps. What were some of the apps that you were looking at in your early days before you found Nicola?
well, the most famous one is the Chani app.
Yep. Yep.
And so
Yep.
love that app. That one I love and I do recommend paying for astrology apps if you can. Hers is really good, very thorough. Um, the other one that there were two that I started using when they first came out, or three that I started using when they very first came out. One was Sanctuary.
Hmm.
Um, and that one's pretty good. The other one I do not recommend. I think it's only AI driven. It's called Cosine. It's not a very I don't recommend that app,
I'll
but
be talking about cosine in the newsletter, trust.
oh. And then the pattern, which is kind of interesting. It's good if you're a beginner, and they've changed a lot of stuff in the app recently, so that's okay. But Chani and also the other one I use regularly is called Astrobella. And what I like about those apps is both of them are like I like the women behind them.
Yes.
I like what they stand for. I like their vibe. I just really, I love what they stand for and how they put the information out there. And they both have different, and again, I believe in paying for stuff like this. So they both have different ways of presenting the information and different strengths. So that's what I like using on the day to day.
Yeah, the challenge that I always present to people too around the free astrology apps is be very mindful going in on how those are data mined because
Yes.
there's a lot of resistance to astrology from powers that be. And so as a consequence, apps, platforms often get targeted. And so if you're using free versions of them, you could potentially be putting yourself in a position of risk, put it that way. So not
Mhm.
only are you not necessarily supporting the people behind the app by using their paid version, you're also putting yourself at cybersecurity risk. That's just sort of my warning to folks as well.
Yeah, always pay for it from either an ethical perspective or protecting your own data perspective. If you're not paying for it, chances are you are the what did they always say? If you
You're
don't pay
still
for it,
paying
you're the
for it.
product.
Yes, yes, you
Yeah,
are the product.
you're the product if
The
you're not
data
paying
is the
for it.
product. Yeah, they're mining your
Yeah.
data for payment. So yeah, there's that old saying, um, ass, gas, or cash, nobody rides for free. Same thing on the internet, friends. Same thing on the internet. Okay,
Yes.
so you mentioned holistic astrology. You also mentioned whole sign astrology, and I think that's really interesting. And people who aren't especially knowledgeable of astrology don't realize that there are several different disciplines. So, can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about your background, your preferences, and what draws you to those particular disciplines?
Yeah. There's a few things going on in what I mentioned. So one, there's there are quite a few, but the two main ones are Vedic astrology, which originates from India, and the other is Hellenistic, which comes from it's evolved from Babylonia all the way through to ancient Greece, and that's those are the two main um, what many people use on from, let's say, the Indian subcontinent over through to California, let's
Mhm.
say, like in this part of the hemisphere. Um, and most people in Europe and North America and Latin America and southern, like South Africa, that I've talked to use Hellenistic astrology. And so that's one component. Then within Hellenistic astrology, there's Placidus and whole sign house.
Mhm.
Placidus, I dabbled in for a while, but so many people, it's not as mainstream and it's much more difficult because it really relies on the houses change size depending on where the sun is in the sky. And so I switched over to whole sign house because most people understand whole sign house. It's what most of the apps use.
Chani uses,
So if I
yep.
do a reading for a client, and one time I remember I did a reading for someone and their nodes were different in Placidus versus
Mhm.
the North Node and South Node, which are the karmic nodes of fate. They were different in Placidus than what they were used to in whole sign. And I kept noticing that started coming up a few times. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to switch back to whole sign because it's easier.
It's consistent and
It's consistent.
yeah,
It's what everybody uses. Yeah.
yeah. So other than you mentioned Nicola, you mentioned some of the apps. What about astrologers? Who do you read? Who do you follow?
Oh, I like, oh my gosh, why can I not remember his name right now? I love the astrology podcast.
Hmm.
It is, if you are I gotta find it right now because if you are a deep dive astrology lover, like you want to go deep into astrology, Chris Brennan, that's his
Okay.
name.
Okay.
He is, so I have ADHD and I'm autistic. So sitting and like reading, unless it's for quick reference, takes me forever to do. But this podcast is wonderful because he crams so much detailed information into each episode, and they're like 2 or 3 hours. So I'll clean my house, I'll drive here, there, and everywhere. And I just get so much information from this guy. And he often has guests on who complement his information. And it's not for the casual astrologer. Let's put it that way. It's
Deep,
like
deep. Yeah.
really dry, really nerdy.
Yeah, yeah. That's Stephen Forrest for me, for sure. Like that, if I really want to geek out on something, then I'll just go through some of his old archives or his new stuff. Stephen Forrest is still putting stuff out there, and that's one of the people I also often recommend for just your initial put your toe in because he's got some great stuff for beginners as well. And that's the thing I think that's can be challenging around astrology is there's so much to it. Most people are familiar with, zodiac and sun sign, and that's about it. And then
Yeah.
the reason, like for me personally, I got into astrology because everyone kept, eschewing it and just going, oh no, no, we know have science
No.
now. And that brings me to the whole astronomy versus astrology. Like there's this whole notion that we started with astrology and then astronomy evolved from that is the modern take. And it's like, no, they're two separate disciplines.
No.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So it wasn't until I believe it was, I don't want to say the specific dates, but it was in modern history, like let's say the late 1800s, like modern compared to how long astrology's been around. When astrology was separated out from proper scientific studies. So it used to be much more revered and studied and respected, and astrologers were consulted and treated with high regard and not as fringe weirdos that are off on the, off in the woo-woo new age realm like they are now. And and once that was separated, then we started evolving into this space where because you can't prove it, except you can because it's like qualitative. It is purely like I swear to God, if I could get a qualitative astrological sociological research project done funded, I would totally do it because I see the correlations big time in this. But because you can't specifically quantify it in a Western modern scientific laboratory, it's invalidated. And that's just bullshit, in my
Yeah.
opinion, you
Yeah.
know? And I'm trying to find these books that I use. One thing, and I love this guy, Stephen Arroyo. He's a
Hmm.
really good one for who's these these astrology books that I have sitting on my desk that I use when I do readings, and Robert Hand, another really good one. Um, they're very, if you read these books, if you study these, they read like scientific texts.
Yeah.
They're no bullshit. It's not, it's very dry. It's very, very methodical. I read something that someone once said that if you did well in geometry in school, you like astrology, and if you did
Yes.
well in art class, you like tarot. And I was like,
I
filthy.
like both.
I like both, but I did better in math than art. Um, so yeah, so it was interesting because those astrology and astronomy eventually diverged. And the other thing that, like most areas of the mystic arts, a lot of women were astrologers, and it was an oral tradition. And we cast birth charts, which were not oral, but like when we would look at the sky and we discuss it and talk about it, a lot of it was done by women.
Mhm.
And so, of course, we know what happens there is that can't take it seriously or your heresy or whatever. And yeah, so it gets
So,
poo-pooed.
yeah. Yeah. So what if people were to consult with you for a reading, what would that experience be like? What could they expect?
Great question. So I mainly do three types of readings. I do, if someone's never had a natal chart reading, which is your your unique soul print. Like I've never seen two birth charts that look alike. It'd be totally rare. But I would do a natal chart reading, and that would just tell you who you are and what makes you tick, what's your destiny, possibly your past life, um, and just kind of what's going on in your inner world. So that's one.
Hmm.
I also do a transit chart reading.
Hmm.
So a lot of times people will message me and say, what in the hell is happening in my life right now? What are the planets doing to make this a disaster? When will this end? So I'll do a transit chart reading. And that, what people don't know is that you have your birth chart, which correlates with the energy that you have inside of you and how you can emotionally act and react in certain situations. And then the planets influence the energy of how you're existing in the world at that moment. And what I love about the transit readings is people, especially if they're going through a hard time, it demonstrates the Buddhist idea of impermanence. Like
Hmm.
this is not forever. This transit ends soon, and you'll experience like a lightening of your emotions, of your heart, of your mind, probably around this time. And most of the time, it's spot on.
Hmm.
So that's what I enjoy about transit readings. And then the other ones I do are solar return readings, which are kind of like
Hmm.
a year ahead for when it's your birthday. And in astrology, we call that your solar return because the sun came back and said, hello,
Hmm.
let's do this again. So
Yeah, and I love return readings of all sorts. So when you have your Pluto return, when you have like all of these different other planetary returns besides, but
yeah,
again, that's all.
America's having its Pluto return.
That's it. That you didn't bring it up for no reason. So just to finish off then, what value do you think a person who doesn't know really much about astrology, what value do you think astrology brings to people, and what's the benefit of doing readings and understanding astrological systems better?
Well, I know he's controversial and I don't and he's stolen work from other people, but Carl Jung has used astrology to help people become more self-aware and learn more about it kind of I like to link it with therapy. My mentor is also a therapist. She's not my therapist, but I always thought, wow, it's a great combo to have a therapist and an astrologer. So astrology helps you learn a lot more about yourself. Also, the number one thing that I bring to my clients is validation. So
Mm,
someone is a Virgo rising, for example. I will say, okay, your light is in your light. You are very giving, you know exactly what the next right steps should be. And your shadow side is you're over giving, you overextend, super codependent, and very self-critical. And people will be like, oh my gosh,
light
that's
bulb.
so true,
Yep.
you know? Or like I'll read other traits based on different parts of their chart. And the best part is like when people I don't know get a reading, like I don't know them at all, I do a reading and I'll say something like, did you have a close family member die when you were a child? I try not
Mhm.
to get too specific, but they'll be like, yes, you know, um and I'll say how that's probably affecting like the way that they move through the world right now based on these other placements, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like really validating for people because a lot of times they'll think they're flawed or broken and they've even gone to therapy, but they still feel like, oh, it's my fault. I'm a terrible person. And then I'll do their chart and I'll say, no, you're not. This is just the body you chose in this go round on Earth.
Yeah, I always refer to my natal chart as my cosmic DNA. Like that's how I
Yes,
really like to
I
talk
love
about it.
that.
And even though which is hilarious, this is so hilarious because I have three psychology degrees, but therapy is not for me. But
Yeah.
astrology is absolutely for me. When I really dove in and understood my birth chart and then started understanding, well, what do the planets mean? What do the signs mean? What do the houses mean? What do the transits mean? What are the different kinds of transits? Now I look up at the sky. I got a beautiful shot of the triple conjunction, by the way, on Friday. So
Oh,
good, so good.
oh,
And
nice.
it's just a nice clear night. And so for me, it's just like these are systems that are ancient, that have been practiced by, yes, we have these astrological systems that we're familiar with, Hellenistic and Vedic most prominently. But when you look at all the other connections with other types of ancient ways of knowing and you see the interconnection, there's
Yeah,
probably was way more connections even than that. But because it's an oral tradition and texts do get burned. I mean, everything we lost in the Library of
yep,
Alexandria, for example, and that's just one example, never mind people who never communicated in that form to begin with. Like, just
yeah,
I don't know. And I always think it's so cute when astronomers talk about astrology because it's like, oh, you're a dear. You have no idea what you're talking about. What you
yeah.
understand of astrology is in contrast to astronomy, and you never bother to dig deeper. So,
That reminds me of another. There's an astrologer I follow on Instagram called Aliza Kelly, and
mm.
she went toe to toe with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and
Oh, perfect.
he was so disrespectful of her,
Yeah.
but she was so calm and steady and at peace. And she just nailed it. Like she was so phenomenal in that interview or in that, I think it was on a podcast. I watched it on YouTube though.
Mhm.
But it was really good. And yeah, it's so funny because then I'll say, I need to look at his birth chart, but sometimes I'll think, I bet that person's a Capricorn rising. And sure enough, if someone with like that kind of personality, I'll be like, yes, they're a Capricorn rising.
Well, I love looking at birth charts of famous people as well because it's just so illuminating. So he was one that I absolutely had in mind when I asked you that question, and of course the other one is Isaac Asimov, which when I heard his take, I was just so disappointed. It's like, dude, I read all your science fiction growing up. Come on.
I didn't, oh, I haven't read his take on astrology.
I
Maybe I
saw
don't
a
want to.
YouTube, you will find a YouTube video. It just, if you Google, Isaac Asimov on astronomy, and if you thought Neil deGrasse Tyson was disrespectful, oh, Isaac. And again, I mean, it was also, a sign of his time as well, because, he's been
Yeah,
gone for a while. But it's just
yeah,
amazing to me how quickly people are to poo-poo something they know zero about. Like instead of getting
yeah,
curious, they're just like, oh no, oh no. And it's like, you literally know nothing about this. Like, don't you think that there could be some, like literally the tides move because of the moon. And that's just
yeah.
one body in what we consider, ruling bodies in astrological charts. I mean, come on.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
interesting.
And we're made of 98% water, so I think we might be affected by the moon.
Well, and I think too, because you touched on this as well, it's because it's intuition based, it's got a lot of
Mhm.
feminine energy associated with which is absolutely not just feminine energy at all. Uh,
No.
yeah,
I
there's so
mean,
much.
right now what's wrecking havoc is well, what was wrecking havoc was the juxtaposition of Mars masculine in Cancer,
Yes.
feminine. And
Yes.
that was the first quarter of 2025, which I gave an astrology a year ahead workshop to a group of women. And I said, just go on vacation for the first like 3 months of 2025. Just hide in a bunker. And sure enough, that's what
That's what
people
we're
have
all asking
done.
each other. How was your first quarter? Well, it was just what the skies told us it was going to be like. That's what mine
Yeah.
was like. So Kelly, I want to thank you so much for taking some time to chat about this today. I mean, we could talk astrology and geek out
Yes.
forever, but I want to be respectful of my audience's time. So thank you so much. And if people do want to work with you, how can they reach out?
Well, you can send me an email at kelly@matry.world. I also have a website, but I will send the link over to that because it's a little bit of a mouthful.
Okay.
It was a
Yeah.
little over creative when I was naming it.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your insights. It was awesome.
Thank you, Linda.